Uh, I hereby open the planning commission work session. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Salazar is excused. Vice Chair Rhodes Dye.
Here.
Commissioner Buck,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson does not appear to be here. Commissioner Schmunk
Here.
and Commissioner Stout will be joining us later.
Do you have any adjustments to the agenda? Okay. So I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourself on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. This meeting is a work session where the public may attend but not provide comment. There will be opportunities to address the planning commission later tonight during our regular session at 7 p.m. And then our agenda item for tonight is like the capital improvement program, a community reinvestment plan, presented to us by Jeff. Is it Pascal?
Pascal.
And Stan Petra.
Wherever you want.
Where do you want to sit? It don't matter. Perfect. We use the full room, so it's sitting over there. Thank you. Yeah, good evening, Vice Chair Rhodes Day and Commissioners. My name is Stan Petrov and I'm the new city engineer here with Jeff Pascal, Community Development Director and previous city engineer. The discussion item I have tonight is the city's capital improvement program, commonly referred to as the CIP. As you likely know, the CIP is a 5-year plan and is updated every 2 years. The updated plan covers years of 2025 to 2029. And as a refresher, the CIP is a planning tool to forecast what projects may reasonably be anticipated and delivered over the next 5 years. These projects typically meet one of 4 criteria: either address regulatory requirements, maintain, repair, or preserve an existing asset, respond to council priorities and citizen requests, which we got like 145 requests today. And then the projects identified in long-range plans. Funding the CIP comes from 5 main sources: user fees collected from users of the system, stormwater, gas tax, etc. System development charges or SDCs, charges collected through development activity. Also assessment fund, costs paid by citizens who own properties benefiting from projects. And the last 2 are bonds and grants. The projects are basically broken up into 4 main systems: stormwater, streets and transportation, wastewater, and buildings and facilities. The project section of the CIP is also organized within those assets by 3 main sections. So the first section is basically an overview, an update table that kind of says where the current projects are at, whether they're in design, completed, or on hold. The second portion is each project detail sheets. It kind of has the breakdown of funding and a better description of what the projects are. And those are again over the 5-year period. And then the last section is just another table, and it has projects listed that are unfunded or partially funded. And those, as resources become available or potential grant opportunities are identified, then some of those unfunded projects could potentially move up into the project list. And then kind of going through those 4 main categories: stormwater, streets of transportation, wastewater, and buildings. Starting with stormwater, a majority of the projects in this update have been placed into hold status. This is due to anticipation of focused limited capital delivery staffing resources to deliver the 24 general obligation GO bond street preservation projects, as well as phase 2 of the Franklin Boulevard project. We just only have so many resources to be able to deliver projects. However, we are continuing water quality initiatives, and they're being advanced through a bunch of the street projects that we're currently in design and we're currently working on. Then streets and transportation's kind of update there is that the city's completed all of the segments that were in the previous 5-year general obligation bond package. Several safety and pedestrian projects were also completed over the past 2 years, such as Astor Street ADA, several RFB projects, the Virginia Daisy Bikeway, and a number of other projects. Current ones in design, we're getting ready to get into the next phase of Franklin roundabouts, 42nd Street levee there's an ongoing study for that project. The Oregon 225 or Franklin Boulevard environmental study and kind of preliminary design is ongoing. And a number of other smaller safety projects and filling in the gaps for the sidewalks projects. If the passage of the 2024 GO Bond project is successful, then we're anticipating planning and design for a bunch more preservation projects and street segments that will start in 2024. In the last decade, going into the wastewater section, last decade, we've seen the funding kind of stabilize for that section of projects. And I have Jeff here to kind of talk about staffing for that and what that kind of entails.
Yeah, so earlier as Stan was talking about some of the limitations, like especially when you look at stormwater and wastewater aren't necessarily a funding resource limitation, it's a staffing resource limitation on moving those projects forward. One thing with moving or coming to the end of our wastewater master plan update is we have a pretty good handle with our consultant on what that future 20-year project list looks like, in addition to an evaluation of our system, our current system for end of life pipe projects. So in essence, we still have 131 miles of concrete pipe in our system. And some of that pipe was put in initially in 1948. On average, most concrete pipe really only has a life expectancy, really a useful life of 50 years. Sometimes the pipe's in good shape, but the gaskets wear out. And so that leads to I&I. And so one of the proposals in looking at upcoming budgets, because if you look at our wastewater fund, we currently have between SDCs and capital resources, about a $20 million reserve. And so one of the things is working on a budget proposal to add staff to start moving many of these projects forward that'll be identified in the wastewater master plan. And so those proposals will be coming forward to the budget committee and ultimately the city council to move that forward and start working on that long list of projects. That staff will also be dedicated to some of the stormwater projects that have been identified in previous master plans.
Yeah, so with that, we're basically just looking for feedback on from the planning commission on the priorities and the projects we've presented. We're going to be coming back again. I understand we're also going to the city council, so maybe before that, we'd like to kind of make sure we have everything squared away.
Yeah, our schedule's a little mixed up in trying to get to all of these committees and the council in a busy schedule. And so we'll actually be at the council for their work session the end of the month on the 27th. So it'll be prior to the planning commission will have their final approval to move it on to the council in December, but that'll be before the council will be holding a public hearing and adopting in January. So any information or feedback that we get from the planning commission will take forward and present to the council at their work session on the 27th. And as Stan said, what we're really looking for is a conversation and guidance on, is there anything that the planning commission sees on here that maybe should be prioritized different, or something that's on the unfunded list, or any kind of feedback as we take information to the council for their discussion on the project priorities.
Commissioner Buck.
Yes, thank you both for coming in and talking with us tonight and giving the presentation. Appreciate that. And so my question is in no way, shape, or reflection of you guys, as you guys are just bringing the information, but when we're looking at information about piping that is 70 years old and those kind of things, I guess my question is, how did we get here? How did we get to a spot where we're pretty behind on those updates and things like that? And you guys might not be able to answer that question, but I think part of the picture going forward, I would like to be able to kind of see something speak to how did we get here so we're not here in the future. And because it's just not a good place to be having to play catch up. So that would be one question that I would have. You know, and as we speak to what do we prioritize, you know, I also think ahead and about that same question. What are the other things if we're prioritizing this now? Are we setting ourselves up for this future conversation about being behind on something else? And so I'm just curious um, about those kind of things. And I don't know if you guys have any answers now for that. That's fine. I'm just putting the question out there to you as it stood out to me during the presentation and reading through the packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Bug. That's a great question and I could give some answers and I think this is kind of a national trend. We probably all hear about aging infrastructure and the fact that we're not putting enough money into maintaining our current asset. I think when we look back in engineering time, when pipe was put in the ground, everybody thought, oh, it's gonna last forever, buried, it's not going to, you know, it's gonna last forever. And the reality is the pipe, sometimes the pipe structure, like when I reference concrete pipe and I've looked at TV tapes and the structure's really solid, but now we're facing issues with our plant and not wanting to expand it. So what we're trying to do is take out that stormwater that's getting in, that infiltration in that water, getting that stormwater getting in and not wanting to treat, in essence, that clean water at the plant. And so, because we have a certain capacity for treatment at the wastewater treatment plant. So that's what we're targeting. And so there's different methodologies that we've come up with to replace that pipe. How did we get here? Well, maybe we thought, you know, in the past that material would last forever. We didn't know what that longevity was. I think, so where we are today with needing to start transitioning more of this pipe out. What we've done, what I can say, what we're doing as part of the wastewater master plan is trying to be more strategic. And so, one of the reasons that you're hearing about this now is, when we put the scope together for our consultant, we asked them to analyze that pipe, put a schedule together for us. How much do we need to replace? What should that schedule be? And it does seem daunting because the schedule they put together for us goes out to 2081, showing us, you know, replacing in essence about, I want to say 2.5 miles of pipe a year on average at a certain dollar. So, so it doesn't seem, you know, and some of it is as it ages, because a lot of it was like, I think the majority of the pipe was put in 1980 that's left in our system because we've done a good job of getting a lot of that older pipe out. So we're not as bad off as we thought, but being more strategic is we're also putting this, part of the scope for that consult was analyzing this, which is kind of our maintenance and preservation, what we should be doing on an annual basis to stay caught up on top of expansion and other issues in the system. But also then taking that information and having them put together for us a financial plan. So looking at our reserves, looking at our expenses and looking at what that trigger is so that we can then take that to council as part of the master plan approval and adoption and say, okay, if we were to build out the 20-year master plan and take care of all of this preservation and maintenance work, here's what that kind of picture looks like financially and how do we get there, that roadmap to get there and what the effects will be. So what should SDC's system development charges be along with user fees? So well, I can say I don't have a full picture of how we got here other than it is a national issue. We know that, but what we're trying to do on the wastewater system part right now is be a little more strategic and take something to the council that then they can say, yeah, we like that plan, or what, you know, what other levers can we pull to kind of soften this blow, or what should we be looking at?
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yeah, just to clear up on your presentation, just a few quick questions. So the funds are from user fees, SDCs, assessment bonds. Is that federal money is one of those four, or is
Yeah,
bond?
the bonds and grants, or the grants are a lot of times federal.
Yeah, federal and state.
Okay, that'd be the
Federal and
bond
state.
category. So just, I guess the assessments were property tax distributed from the county.
So
I don't want to get. into-
Yeah, no,
Give me a feeling.
typically our assessments come from what we call local improvement districts. So we haven't done a lot. We've done a few. In one most recently was about 5 years ago, I think now or more. I lose track of time, but where we had a a neighborhood had the sewer extended for the whole neighborhood. And so in essence, yes, those then are bonded by the city and then paid back with property tax assessments
Right.
for that
They're
area.
fairly rare.
Yeah, because it takes a neighborhood and those projects then have to be initiated by the city council.
Okay, you said the wastewater projections were stable, fairly stable. You could see that. So I'm getting that you can't necessarily see the streets as well. Is that? a way to-
Streets are not, so a little history on the streets. So in 2004, 2005, the street system was pretty stable. We were receiving funding through secure rural roads or from the county. So we were receiving funds from the county to maintain streets through timber taxes, things like that. Those went away. And so what we've seen is our revenues have gone down and flattened. So our main source of revenue for streets and transportation or in maintenance is gas tax and apportionment from the state through
When you say
registration.
Maine, what are we talking, 95%?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know the exact
No,
total,
I-
but it's
I
the
just-
majority of our revenue. It comes from gas tax and the state apportionment through vehicle registration. And so as we've seen in the projections we get from the state is that's flattening or it's going down, right? So it's not keeping up with inflation. It's lessening each year. And so what we're seeing just on maintaining or keeping up, just keeping the street lights on, keeping signals running, just electric power and things like that, and our general operations is outpacing our revenue. So then that does not leave us enough revenue to dedicate towards capital projects such as preservation. And so then when the council authorized us and the voters approved the bond in 2018, that was our biggest influx of road preservation money since about 2008.
Okay.
And so what we're back into now that we finished the bond work that was approved is we're back into that situation where we're not seeing enough revenue beyond going out and getting grants from the federal programs or the state programs. The one thing I'll say about getting grants, those are great, but typically they have to be big projects like the Franklin Boulevards, Mill Street. So they have to be on a regional system typically, so collector or above. That doesn't really help us on our local street network or even our local collectors. And so in order to qualify, they have to hit certain things that don't always hit every project that we have in our system.
Okay, if I may, so in terms of allocating, talking streets mainly, I guess, well, you said that, some wastewater projects are helping you in terms of streets. And so when you do the infrastructure, you kind of,
Stormwater.
so
Yeah.
it works hand in hand.
Yeah, because on the transportation projects, you're required to treat the impervious surface and the runoff, so
Okay.
you're basically forced to do the stormwater stuff, so they kind of go hand in hand a lot
Okay,
of
so-
times.
So you couldn't. So is some of this, okay, well, let me ask it this way. Sorry, the allocation, so it's my understanding of city council, it's, you're doing each ward, you're giving each ward something. And what are the other criteria, general criteria that you're using for the, how you're picking this? Picking each space for immediate or future.
So I wouldn't say ward, we would put ward in just so we know where the projects are, but that doesn't necessarily help
You're
us.
not pandering to
prioritize.
each council person.
Usually what I look at our asset system and I look at kind of citywide where it's like the highest priority is what gets scheduled
Okay.
first. And if like you could take wards 1 and 2, and that's where most of our older wastewater pipe is. So you're gonna see most of our preservation projects in those wards. It has nothing to do with the ward. It has to do with the age of the system.
Okay, just give us a general sense of the criteria that you're using. I mean, are you going out there and looking at these roads? Are you doing other and more intense? Help me understand that.
Yeah, I think so. What we do is every 2 years, our operations staff goes out and does a citywide roads assessment and they give a number. They're starting to shift to a generally acceptable standard for, analyzing those roads, which gives us a number so that we know a rating. So we know where that number, that asphalt rating is on it. And then we can determine based on that rating, what the typical need is. Is it in fair or better condition? good to poor, all the way down to poor, and then we know where it hits. Typically, we like to hit streets before they hit poor. We want to hit them in that
Right.
fair. That's when we're
Yeah.
doing the preservation work, which one of the communication things is a lot of people ask us, and the feedback we get even on the bond projects is, why are you paving that street over this street? Well, I always use it. Mill Street's gonna cost us upwards of $10 million by the time we're done for a mile of street. We were able to pave almost 4 miles of street for $10 million and preserve it. And the goal is not to have streets end up as Mill Street. The goal is to keep those streets continuing by doing preservation work and maintaining them for the whole life.
Okay, well, let me ask you about specific 42nd north. So from Weyerhaeuser to Marcola, that's planned, that's in engineering right now, right? So is that, you have to take care of the
Levy.
impervious surface? So that drives up the cost of that road by how much? 50% or? I mean, it's draining now, is what I'm
Oh.
saying. So why aren't you just going through there and, stripping the pavement off and repaving it? It appears to be most of it
So I can
solid,
give
at least
a
from the
little.
freeway to Marcola.
Yeah, so I can give a little more background on 40. So what we're doing with North 42nd Street right now is working with council leadership and then the council as a whole. Is we received $12 million from the state through legislation in 2017. And that was for really targeted at safety and transit upgrades. So to basically upgrade the whole system more to an urban environment rather than what is right now a
You're
county
talking
or
about
state.
42nd specifically or? the city?
42nd Street
Alright.
specifically. So we received $12 million from the state to bring for safety transit upgrades. And mobility upgrades. The other issue we have going on 42nd Street is we have a levee out there that it can't be certified, that protects about a third of the city from flooding. And so we have to get that recertified, and that's a longer term
Okay, but hold
project.
on, you waiting for the construction for the certification of the levy?
So on the full upgrades to 42nd Street, because there's a limited width space of right of way. And so whatever we do with the levee may affect what the future of that road looks like. And so they kind of have to go hand in hand. However, we're taking part of that $12 million and we're putting it into a very minimal pavement preservation to get us bridge that gap, in essence, improve the surface for the intermediate time on while we finish our study of the levee and we start looking for federal aid grants to upgrade the
And
levee.
hoping that you don't have to throw away that section of road or
Yeah.
what?
Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say back to your original question about the stormwater treatment, we don't have to do that with this first project, because we're kind of just, it's a repair, we're just grinding out the pavement and putting it back, so
Particularly
that
if
will
they're
be in a
gonna
future project.
Change the levy.
Yeah, if we widen it, we put in, we change the width of it or something, then we're gonna have to do the full.
And to be very clear, the type of preservation we're doing on that roadway will probably only last 10 more years before it's back to where it is today, which is the target. Because the goal is in the next 5 to 10 years to have a full picture of what the need is to recertify that levee. So that then we can start working with legislation, with our legislators and working with our lobbyists to get legislative or federal aid funding to upgrade that levee.
Okay, so the goal in terms of the road, is that going to be beyond, will the life of that road, this upgrade be beyond the life that you're saying that you have to do something about the levee? Because if you don't do something, will the road still be okay for a while? Are you with me?
It'll be back to where it is today would be the prediction. That's the level of preservation
So
that
you're
we're
going-
planning. We don't want to spend more money on the road than we need to, hopefully, when we redo the whole road in another. 10
And
to
you can
12 years.
control that to some degree in terms of your construction methods? You following me? Your timeline as to how long that road will last?
It's an estimate based on just engineering and evaluation of the materials. that we
Okay,
use.
so, but I mean, you're within reason, you're telling me you can control that, whereas if you put a whole bunch of money in, that's gonna last a lot longer.
Correct.
Okay, well, so let me, I guess if anybody else wants to ask a question, I'd like to ask a couple more, is that right?
I mean, we got till 7 o'clock,
Oh,
so
okay, well, we'll play out.
keep rolling.
So the roundabout on the other side of 42nd, I'm just picking 42nd out of, you know, the air, I guess, kind of, but the roundabouts, so you got, sorry, for that roundabout that intersects all those streets, I guess help me, I'm looking for
Is
the.
it the one at Daisy Street?
Yeah, the engineering is what I'm trying to find, yeah, here it is, 594,000, correct? So, if you've done design build, where you just get a contractor and you lay out the contract, you say, this is what we want to end up with, and they come in and they just build it, have you looked at that?
Not for any of our roadway construction projects.
Are
that
they
we
capable of
design-
doing that, do you
design
know?
build.
Well, let me ask you this question to clarify, sorry. So what, $594,000, so $600,000, what do you think that thing's gonna cost to build? You guys kind of know, right?
I think that's just the roundabout at that section, and it's a smaller one lane, it's smaller than the one that's south of that. Well, you're putting me in a spot right
No, I-
now, and Stan's probably sitting here, yeah, I wanna
I
hear
would
your
not
answer,
hold it.
because right now, with the way inflation and way
Yeah,
construction
yeah.
materials are, it's really hard to predict. But I think when we originally estimated that, it was about $1.5 million for that intersection.
Okay, so a quarter of it's going into engineering. I mean, that just seems obtuse.
Well, I can't tell
The right
you.
word?
Well, right, I will tell you, and Stan knows this too, because I mean, he did come from, we've seen consultant engineering prices just really inflate a lot over the last few years. Extremely, and some of that just is similar to what we're facing internally, where we've struggled to fill some positions just because of the lack of applicants or the lack of folks in that field. And the private sector has faced that. The difference is that they've been able to basically go and buy people to come in and work, or we're paying consultants that are, a lot of our
Design
consultants
build.
are from engineering.
Yeah.
Well, we'd still probably pay the same amount for engineering, because that contractor, what a design build contract would work, we'd hire the general contractor who would build it, but then they would have to go hire the engineer to design
Yeah,
it.
but they have to protect themselves against each other. The design build guy doesn't have to do that. So I don't want to belabor that.
Yeah, and I have experience with the state kind of on the bigger projects, and they do that a bit, but. You know, you're kind of excluding a lot of the smaller contractors with the design build too, because they're not, just a lot of the smaller contractors don't do that. It's the bigger ones that I've seen that typically do it, so.
And
But I don't know that they would be
I'm a little aggressive. I realize that. I hope, it's not personal at all. You guys are doing great. I appreciate the information. It helps me a lot in the future, hopefully, but, so the 42nd Street is $1.5 million for engineering, but yet it's gonna be only a limited,
Which 42nd Street?
the North 42nd piece.
I don't think that's been updated since we looked at the $12 million project.
So you think-
We haven't gone and inflated that, since that was based 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I think that, and I can say I pulled that number from the original STIP estimate. And so that was probably even 4 years old at that time when I pulled that number, but I would say if we were to look at that today, the engineering alone, because I can tell you right now on Mill Street, and this is working with the state, so ODOT went and got that contract, and I want to say that engineering alone on Mill Street is upwards of $2 million through just to get us to construction.
Okay,
And that was just over the last 2 years.
and that ate up the budget and had to go find more money for it, is that?
Well, that and just construction itself estimates over time, because part of that was the delay. That project was originally planned, I have to think, so we're in 2023. That project was originally awarded as far as the grant in 2018. Well, it took us about 2 years to get an IGA with the state to move that forward through ODOT. So in that meantime, then we hit COVID. And then we hit this inflationary issue, and so the timing was really poor, and so that inflated the construction costs as well, and then in turn, also the engineering costs.
Okay. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
I can't tell you, we have looked at design build in the past. In 2009, that was an option when we had to try and get 40,000 linear feet of sanitary sewer replaced due to an enforcement order. So we have looked at it. My experience is it doesn't always save you money. Sometimes it can create more headaches, especially when you end up in disagreements with the contractor on what they said they could do for the price. I mean, we had a similar issue on the, jail in Justice Center construction when they came back and said, well, now we got, with these things. we
Well,
need
and
more.
obviously that's more, the staff has to be more aware in those situations, but if there's it's a margin to be gained.
Yeah.
But I wanted to also point out, in terms of small, I'd like to see this stuff go to some small contractors, but prevailing wages, that's out the window. So, and am I correct? You can't spend $1, all has to be prevailing wages, no cutoff. Is that
It
right?
depends. Well, yeah, prevailing wage starts at $50,000. So once the
My understanding
contract,
that's now changed, that's not, well.
I'll have to go
would you
back.
check that?
I
I'd
will.
like to know.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
will.
Appreciate it.
I'll research that. Basically all of our procurement stuff is set up. I'll have to check because legislation changes. I'll double check that with our procurement staff, but last it was 50. So we pretty much plan on anything that's 35 and over. Unless it's changed, $35 and $1,000 and over is prevailing wage, just because if you do a change order or something that takes it over 50,000, now you have to go back and pay everything in prevailing wage, which creates a whole paperwork nightmare.
Okay.
So you have to be very careful. So usually we just, pretty much everything we do is prevailing wage unless we know it's very, very small.
Mhm.
And then the other issue is if it's similar type work, you can't, the state's very, they watch it very closely. You can't break work up purposefully to avoid prevailing wage.
If you're gonna put out $50,000 jobs, you're gonna have to build up some companies that can handle that kind of work, and if it's not available, they're not gonna build up. It's just, that's the way things are. Okay, thank you.
I can see the design build being good, like maybe on the Franklin projects too. It's the ones that are more complicated where the designer, sometimes they design a project and then you get out to bid and the contractor gets it and they can't build it because they didn't know the equipment that they're using or something like that, or the staging of it or something. So, it seems like the more complicated, bigger projects are the ones where that really, sometimes pays off because you have them working together. And so they're like, yeah, we have this equipment, we want to do it this way. This is the cheapest way to do it. Then the designer designs it that way. And some of these other projects are just more straightforward and, you tend to get.
Well, anyways, maybe look at some of those options,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Commissioner Buck?
Thank you. With respect to the conversation around the cost, I think that's an important aspect. I do want to remind newer commissioners that some of these issues that we're touching on have come before the Planning Commission in the past, and we got pretty overwhelming feedback from the community that we kind of fell short on really hearing their needs. The staff plan really didn't meet the community's needs or interests. That was made really clear, and we sent a very divided vote to City Council that the mayor 2 days later said we're pushing this off, and then it was sent back to staff and it didn't really come to a vote. Our job is to do a really good job of setting the council up for making good decisions. And in my opinion, we failed to do that when the Main Street Safety Project came before us. And while cost is one thing, I think that we need to look at certain factors that the community just was not able to tolerate. The impact on businesses, the length of construction, those kind of things. There's no question that improvements need to be made. There's no question that we need to make adjustments to increase safety. One of the biggest things we need to do, it was made very clear, we need to get people to slow down, and we need to see what we can do to discourage left-hand turns, as those cause a lot of serious injuries. But the way we did it in the past, I think we need to do a better job being mindful of how do we do this so that it really benefits the community. And as a community, we can all get behind it. It's not good for anybody when we're seeing signs at our local business, contact your city councilors and tell them they're not doing a good job. And that's on us as a planning commission to do a better job of helping staff put together a plan that the city council can do something with, it can act on. And so when we look at these projects and these roundabouts, I'm not against roundabouts, and I'm not against any of a lot of the things we're talking about here. But I do know that when we start bringing these kinds of discussions up and they come before city council, it's going to trigger a community response because of what's happened before. And those of us, not everybody on the planning commission now was here for that. And it's unfortunate that Chair Salazar isn't here because he could also speak to this. But I just want to put it out there for the record that we need to work collaboratively to create something that's going to really be embraced by the community. And I think we can do that. But some of the key issues were the disruptions to business. And it was a plan that was going to be implemented over 20 years. And those are some of the things that the community remembers. They also remember a lot of roundabouts, and it just seemed like it was a lot. And so we got that feedback, and I just want to remind the council, or not the council, the commission of that. And so whatever we can do to support staff in not repeating those steps would be really, I think it's crucial for us to do that. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody or criticize staff. This is as much a criticism of myself because I was on the commission at the time. So we all own needing to do a better job, and I'm certainly part of that. So I just wanted to put that out there, that cost is absolutely important, and I'm not saying that it's not, but also how the community can really conceptualize it and get behind it is crucial, because again, it doesn't do anybody any good for us to approve a plan that the city council just can't do anything with. And then they made a very clear statement that was the case last time. So just wanted to put that out there for the record. Reading through this, I really like the points you guys are making. I think you did a great job in lining out, hey, we need to look at some of these issues. And I don't think there's anything inappropriate about this, how it's laid out here. I just wanted to point out the history of, what we went through a little over, I guess it was a year ago. And a lot of people in town haven't forgotten that. And so at the end of the day, that's an important piece in my opinion. So that's all I've got. And not, like I said, I'm not trying to be critical of anybody. I'm just trying to raise the issue. Like, this was the feedback we got, and I just want us to be all aware of that. Like I said, it's I'm as much part of that as anybody.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Buck, and I'm the reminder that I think our role here is to try to be a liaison to the community, and make sure that hopefully we're seeing some things. So I guess with that in mind, I want to ask you about 42nd Street again. So are you putting a pipe in so you can have another lane to come off what would be eastbound? Follow me? 42nd, come off the freeway eastbound. There's a big ditch there. Put a pipe in there. You got another lane that you can, and that'll, these climate folks want these tailpipes to, not be spewing. While you're backing up traffic, it's a lot of carbon going in the air.
I would say it's premature to kind of figure out what we're going to do right there, because we haven't even started the planning for that section of roadway. So we know there, we've that feedback's there, but part of that will be kind of studying the traffic impacts and moving that forward, and a planning process.
Well, I think if you know where I'm talking about, I guess here's what prodding you to just, stick a pipe in there. I know that they can tear the levee up, but I think getting that in there and getting that traffic flowing better through there, I mean, it's almost a no-brainer to me, but if you guys have thoughts on that, I appreciate knowing. Just, twist my thinking, if you will.
No, I think everything's kind of on that, you know, what we look at for traffic control. I don't think there's any commitment today to what that looks like and how we manage stormwater and what we do with those ditches, that ditch system in the stormwater. So I think that's where I say it's a little premature. As we'll go through a planning process, and then there'll probably be a public process as well, given some of the changes that are gonna go on out there and those
Take
options.
care of the community.
Yeah, we know in the next 10 years, we're gonna do a full reconstruct of that roadway, so we just don't wanna spend any money now that just kind of gets thrown away, or, you know, that it ends up getting changed, and so I think that's right now, we're just trying to do the minimum to preserve the pavement.
I think we are going to, I mean, I will say one thing, because there are some, and we're working with our traffic division. But one of the complaints we hear is the left turn out of there and the safety issues and the fact that, you know, and so we're working with our traffic division to include at least some temporary. Traffic control measures in there to try and improve that off ramp and that left turn and.
Well, a lot of the traffic goes to Olympic and you can't get there with 42nd backed up. Now, maybe the improvements you're gonna make will make that flow out of there, but I know.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm not a transportation planner, so I just know that there is and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I just know that there are a lot of issues in that area that part of it needs to be a little bit more study done in planning, and that's part of the overall project. It's just until we kind of have a better picture on what the levee looks like and what that's going to entail, because that levee again protects a third of the city. I can't remember if it's $4 billion of infrastructure and businesses is the last estimate we had from our emergency manager of what it protects. And so kind of getting that recertified, and that has a lot of impacts because one of the reasons it doesn't meet current certification beyond the fact that it hasn't been maintained is it needs to be raised 3 feet most likely. And so how do you do that in a limited space with a roadway right there and all of that and still accommodate all of the vehicle traffic? And so that's why it's a little premature until we kind of have a full picture on what the need is with the levee.
Okay, I'm sorry, one more question. So of these improvements, what are you guys having the most angst about? I mean, what's the biggest problem you see? And you're trying to do too many projects with not enough money. Where if you had a little more money, what would you do? What types of things generally, what would you do?
So I think there's 2 things that I work on, and I don't know what Stan might have fresh eyes on it. He's been here going on 6 months now, maybe a little longer. But as the previous city engineer and working on most of these master plans and working on these plans and having done the CIP since 2005. I think when I look at this as that's why you'll see I'm working on a proposal to add staffing for the wastewater and stormwater to move those projects forward. Because the financial side of things is not the resource limitation, it's a staffing resource limitation, and looking at the most cost-effective way of moving that forward and being strategic on the wastewater and addressing that issue. Because not only do we have issues where we have infrastructure that's reaching end of useful life, but we also have permit issues, permits that mandate work and make sure that we're maintaining and we're meeting certain requirements. So, making sure we're setting ourselves up as a city to keep moving that work forward, and we're addressing those needs. And so utilizing this next master plan update and kind of identifying and then putting a strategic proposal together. The other would probably be, which has been something that we've been talking about for many, many years, and that really is funding for street preservation, just our local street network and maintaining that asset. I mean, we're talking about $1 billion worth of assets that the city owns, and just the fact of how do we generate revenue? What do we look at? And how do we effectively maintain the assets that we do have to manage? And how do we keep that up to make sure that the community is prosperous and that things are taken care of? And so those are kind of the 2 things. And really it's that street piece, because it's what do we do on the revenue side so that are we going to continue to rely on voter approved bonds, or are we trying to look at what those other levers are that maybe we can bring to the council to consider for revenue alternatives so that we can have a healthy street fund similar to our other asset funds.
Got it. Question. You talked a couple of times about this new staff position that you would like to add. What is the timeline to getting that?
So I'm looking at FY 25 and it's several staff positions because it's really a project group, a team, because there's several parts. There's, there's field folks, there's engineers and that sort of thing. So that's part of the budget proposal. So I'm targeting fiscal year 25 budget. So July 1.
July 1 of 25. Okay. And are there any pieces of that timeline?
24, so
Oh.
FY 24. So this coming July. So yeah,
That's not bad.
I always gotta
Right.
switch between fiscal years and calendar years. So.
Cool. Love it. Any more?
No.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
I'm gonna adjourn this work session.
Just one other thing, so I did get confirmation passed along from our assistant city attorney that 50,000 is the limit for, that's when triggers prevailing wage.
And then we'll come back to our regular session at 7 PM.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you guys very much for your presentation and talking with us.
No.
It was better than primetime sports. You, or better than primetime sports.
Okay, we're ready. All right, I hereby open the regular session of the Planning Commission. Can we get a roll call?
Sure, Chair Salazar is absent and excused. Vice Chair Rhodes Dye.
Here.
Commissioner Buck,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson. Not seeing him. Commissioner Schmunk
Here.
and Commissioner Stout.
Here. Okay, do we have any adjustments to the agenda? No, okay. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. And can you be on mute if you're online? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. First item is the approval of the minutes from our meeting on October 17th. Are there any corrections to the minutes as published in the packet? Hearing no changes, the minutes from October 17th are approved with no corrections.
No. Because by consensus, it's fine for minutes approval.
Do you have any business from the audience? Okay.
May wanna,
Read.
I'm
this
just looking
item.
online to see if there's anything. And I don't see any.
Okay. Can we read it or not read that highlighted part since we don't have any business from that?
I think you can continue on.
Okay. We're skipping a lot of things, they're way down to this agenda item, right?
Right.
Okay. So our agenda item, Peace Health Metro Plan Amendment and Zone Change. Christina has an explanation of that.
Yes, 1 second. The role of the Planning Commission is to conduct public hearings and to make decisions about land use matters in Springfield. In making those decisions, the Commission must apply the law of Springfield that existed when the application was filed and cannot vary from or change that law. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, members of the Planning Commission will state whether they have any conflicts of interest, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. If such a potential conflict exists, the commissioner will state whether he or she is without actual bias and whether he or she would like to step down from the planning commission during the case. Planning commissioners will also state whether they have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts. Sorry, one second, such as a visit to the site in question. If any planning commissioners have had such contacts, they will disclose the substance of that contact. If a planning commissioner has independent knowledge of relevant facts, the planning commissioner will summarize those facts. During the time for public testimony, a witness may challenge the impartiality of a planning commissioner and may rebut the substance of a planning commissioner's knowledge of the facts. The commissioner in question will respond to such a challenge. A copy of the procedures and agenda for today's hearing and copies of the staff report have been posted on springfieldoregonspeaks.org. Any person with an interest in tonight's agenda may offer relevant oral or written testimony or both. If you want the Planning Commission to consider your testimony and to preserve your right to appeal the decision to the City Council and ultimately to the Land Use Board of Appeals, you must testify orally or in writing before the Planning Commission closes the written record. You must raise an issue clearly enough so people can understand what it is and offer evidence in support of it, or else you cannot raise that issue on appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. If you are the applicant, you must raise concerns about any conditions of approval clearly enough to allow the Planning Commission to respond to preserve your right to seek damages in circuit court. If you feel you need more time to prepare evidence or testimony for the Planning Commission, you may ask the Commission to hold open the record or to continue the hearing. You must make that request before the chair closes the public portion of the hearing. Regardless of whether the hearing is continued or the record is held open, state law provides we must hold the record open for at least 7 days after it is closed to all other parties to allow the applicant to submit final written arguments in support of an application unless the applicant waives that right. Please make sure your testimony is related to the applicable criteria. The criteria for the zoning map amendment are in Springfield Development Code Section 5.22.115C. And the criteria for the Metro Plan Diagram Amendment are in Springfield Development Code Section 5.14.135. The criteria are described in more detail in the staff report posted on springfieldoregonspeaks.org and will be summarized by staff in the presentation this evening. Demonstrations from the audience are prohibited. Comments from the audience or comments from the phone or online that are out of turn will not be part of the record. Please make sure tonight to begin your testimony by giving your name and mailing address. If you represent someone else, please say so. If you have any exhibits you wish the Planning Commission to consider, such as a copy of testimony, photographs, petitions, or other documents or physical evidence, please make sure it is emailed to Andy Limbird, ALIMBIRD@springfield-or.gov before the written record is closed, or it is presented to the Planning Commission Secretary. Chair, it is now appropriate to open the public hearing and ask if any Planning Commissioner wishes to declare any potential conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or independent knowledge of relevant facts.
Thank you. So I'm going to open this public hearing and ask the commissioners to disclose ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest. Chair Salazar is not here. I have no actual conflicts of interest and a potential conflict of interest as a realtor doing work in the community. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have no actual conflicts of interest or bias. I do have potential as I'm an insurance agent and I do business in the area.
Commissioner Thompson's still not here. Is that right? Commissioner Schmo?
No conflicts.
Commissioner Stout?
No conflicts, no ex parte, no actual or potential conflicts.
Okay. Are there any challenges to the impartiality of the Planning Commission or objections to the Commission's jurisdiction to hear this matter? Okay, hearing none. Yeah. Okay. Andy Limbird, Vice Staff Report.
Bear with me. I'm going to be doing some screen sharing here. There it is. Okay. So this request is for a site in the Campus Industrial District of North Springfield, North Gateway area. Be able to advance the screen here. There we go. The site is at the southwest corner of an existing property holding of Peace Health. The adjoining facility to the east there is the Peace Health Riverbend Annex. It's a laboratory facility for Peace Health for the hospital. They actually have an underground pneumatic tube that runs to the hospital for samples to go back and forth. Just kind of anecdotal information there. It's an existing just under 4.99, just under 5 acres, 4.99 acres that have been identified. The current zoning designation is campus industrial. It's at the intersection of Game Farm Road and Maple Island Road. Game Farm Road being a collector street, so it has frontage on the collector street and Maple Island Road. And it has essentially a roundabout intersection access at the northwest corner. The applicant's also proposing access right in, right out off of Game Farm Road. It is vacant. It's a remnant filbert orchard. It doesn't appear that the orchard has been maintained for productivity. So it's a site that has remained zoned for campus industrial and designated for some type of campus industrial use since the inception of this area in Springfield, which was in 1998, I believe. So it's been vacant for a significant period of time. The applicant is looking to redesignate and rezone to facilitate development of a rehabilitation hospital, which is a medical services facility on the site. It's not a listed use in the campus industrial district. So I'm just going to identify the site here. This is a segment or just a snapshot of a portion of the current Metro Plan diagram, relatively updated to include some of the sites that adjoin this area or approximate to this area that have been redesignated in the last 10 years or so. So you can see there's a contiguous area just marked by kind of a crude crosshatch pattern that is campus industrial. The applicant is proposing to redesignate it to commercial. The commercial designation is necessary for the proposed medical services zoning on the site. Medical services zoning cannot be applied where there's other than a commercial designation on the site. So there's a dual step that is being requested of this particular site. I'm just going to show you the site relative to the Gateway Refinement Plan, which is a little bit more detailed. It shows the different parcelization, so to speak, of the area. Recently, in the last, I'd say 8 years, there has been redesignation of sites along Dedmon Ferry Road, including this site. So just for, I guess, for context, it's become a fairly busy area. We have construction of a assisted living facility here called the Esther. It's not yet open, but it's pending. It's almost complete, and it's even in the, you might see commercials on TV, as I have, for people to come to the assisted living facility. There's an existing memory care facility here. The areas to the south and east are part of the Peace Health Riverbend campus. Some of the area has been developed, some of it is vacant, but it is an area that is kind of magnetizing. It's generating interest and co-location of other medical related facilities, including the Riverbend Laboratory. Laboratories are allowable use in campus industrial. Other things that are allowable uses are like corporate headquarters. Peace Health has recently located on the site formerly occupied by Symantec. And so there are a number of new corporate locators in this area, new facilities and new corporate entities that have located here, all of which are in the medical or health related field. So there's a gravitation to this site, and understandable why there may be a desire to have a complementary medical use in that vicinity. So it's in close proximity to the hospital. It's not directly abutting it. However, the zoning is not conducive to that. So the proposal is for designating the site commercial, as illustrated here. The existing zoning is campus industrial, and the proposed zoning is for medical services. Do note that the refinement plan does not designate the rights of way with any particular use, but we do have zoning of rights of way. So staff has extended the zoning to abut the properties across the street, so there isn't an intervening fragment of zoned right of way that's kind of not contiguous with any use. So it goes to the center line of Maple Island Road. It follows the boundaries that the applicant has proposed, but is projected across the right of way to the south boundary of Game Farm Road. So there isn't a strip, a remnant fragment of the campus industrial zoning. It's more for the city to update its zoning maps in the future. And it does not materially affect the request here, other than to add some legal descripted areas of public right of way to be included in the zoning map amendment. So staff has amended the applicant's request to include the portions of abutting public right of way for the zoning. That is essentially the request. The applicant, as indicated in their narrative, they're looking at approximately 67,000 square foot. I'm calling it a 1.5 story facility, and that was maybe a little confusing to folks. It's not like, you know, so short. It's not a full second story footprint, as I understand it. So there's a main floor footprint that you see here, and only a portion of the building will actually have a second story to it. So it's not the full footprint, as I understand it. So it's not double the size of I think it was a 45,000 square foot footprint roughly that's shown here. So it will not be a 90,000 square foot facility with, you know, a full second story. That's my understanding. The applicant is obviously not requesting site plan approval. They can't proceed to provide any application for site development yet until the site is rezoned. But this is a conceptual layout showing how the facility would be potentially located on the site, the potential site access locations, and how it would fit in with existing development in the vicinity. So that's the purpose for providing this illustration. There would be more details required when they come forward with a actual site development plan. But for context for the request, this is the conceptual plan that has been provided. So staff understands approximately 150 employees at this location. So it's definitely an employment use. It's a desired target industry for the city in its adopted comprehensive plans. Healthcare services is I guess a top tier target employment sector for the city. And so this would fulfill that desire and policy in the Gateway Refinement Plan area here. What's interesting is that this could represent potentially a shift and dynamic for the campus industrial district. It's been more than 30 years. Sites are partially, you know, it's mostly developed, but there's still a lot of vacant property, including this site. The original kind of colonizers of the campus industrial district, Sony, Symantec, Royal Caribbean, unfortunately all gone. And so reuse of existing buildings and kind of an evolution of the type of sector, type of employment that we're seeing in this area is something that I think warrants due consideration because maintaining steadfast zoning and code provisions without flexibility and you know, accommodating a desired I guess user of the site could, you know, leave land vacant, you know, prolonged vacancies, and then they'll seek another location somewhere else. So that's a request that's before the commission this evening. There are a couple of recommended conditions that staff has added. This site at the very southeast corner, right on Game Farm Road, there is a sanitary sewer pump station that is designed and intended to serve the entire kind of catchment area of the Deadman Ferry, International Way, Maple Island Road, that area. It needs to be upgraded and the capacity increased over time as new users and there's increased flow to the site. One of the requirements that the city is looking to have the applicant fulfill is to have a capacity analysis to confirm that this facility will not exceed the current capacity and of that pump station. If there is a requirement to upgrade or upsize any of the equipment in the pump station to deliver sanitary sewer flows to the sewage treatment plant in Eugene, there would be an incremental proportional cost for this site relative to all of the other contributing lands that would be required of the applicant to fulfill their share, their apportionment of upgrades to the sewer system, the pump station specifically. The other important consideration that was brought forward by the fire marshal's office, there's an existing fire hydrant on the site. It may or may not have the flow capacity, not likely for a multi-story building of this size, and I guess a somewhat complex articulated design. It's likely that there will be building sprinklering required, as well as possibly another fire hydrant just to provide enough coverage for the site. And one of the recommended conditions, again, in your staff report for the zoning, is to have the applicant provide an analysis confirming that there is sufficient flow capacity and fire hydrant placement for this type of facility. This can be done at site plan review, but it's something that will be required before any facility can be built, and fire coverage therefore required in order to protect the structure and the eventual occupancy of it. Staff has posted the site, mailed notification was sent out, online notification on the website. There were no comments or no written comments were received. So there's nothing in the record or to be added to the record as far as testimony at this point. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant has a presentation to make as well, so I can, if I'll maybe just hold questions until after they've had their opportunity to provide testimony, and I'll switch it over to the applicant's
Sounds great.
presentation. Yeah, welcome. Let me. So that one already brought up Sandy.
Yeah,
Okay, back to the Zoom screen.
the PowerPoint is open.
That look familiar? All right, okay.
Do you want to advance or do you want me to?
How do I advance?
Yeah.
Andy, do you know how to advance?
I was advancing it by pressing the actual pad, the button. Pressing the pad.
Okay, thanks. All right. Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Mike Reeder. I'm a land use attorney with an address of 375 West 4th Avenue, Suite 205 in Eugene, and I represent Peace Health. And I'm here tonight to advance the application for the Metro Plan Amendment and the zone change for this particular piece of property. And with me tonight from Peace Health is Alicia Beamer. She is the Chief Administrative Officer for Sacred Heart, and Grady Lehman, who is the Planning Director for Peace Health for Sacred Heart as well. They're here to answer any questions that the commissioners may have, but I'll be doing the presentation. Also, our traffic engineer, Kelly Sandow, is here in the audience as well and can speak if necessary. I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief because Andy did a great job in his presentation. Some of the slides here may be a little repetitive, and so I'll skip through those, but some of them will show you a little bit of the context of this site. So this is a plan amendment zone change application for a 4.99 acre piece of property that is currently owned by Peace Health. And the motivation for this is to have an inpatient rehabilitation facility with about 50 beds that would employ about 150 healthcare workers.
And it would more fully utilize an underutilized parcel currently owned by Peace Health. This is the old Sony building property. This proposal for a plan amendment zone change would be on that southwestern corner of the property. So let me see if I can advance this.
Might have to move the cursor arrow to the end.
Trying an arrow. No.
Let me try that. Anybody smarter than me?
Should be down at the bottom where there's the two arrows on the bottom bar.
Okay, there we go. This here is a A&T map showing the subject property in yellow. The property, here's an aerial view showing the old Sony building that is currently owned by Peace Health. It's the lab, and it's on a, like I said, a larger underutilized piece of property currently designated and zoned campus industrial. Again, we've seen this. This is the Metro Plan diagram showing the location of the proposal. It's pretty small. So the criteria for a plan amendment zone change is fairly broad. And the reason is because the Metro Plan acknowledges that we need to have flexibility in our land use because things change. And as was brought up by Mr. Lindbergh, the campus industrial zone is a relic of bygone days. And we now have a more robust medical services community here in this part of Lane County in Springfield. And this is an opportunity to strengthen that healthcare cluster near the hospital. And the great thing about this location is we also have really good transit. We have the LTD MX bus stop close by. We have great facilities, lots of urban services. We are not planning to propose, we're not proposing to change the Metro Plan text at all. We're just, this is just an application for a text amendment, or I'm sorry, a map amendment. This, we've again seen the zoning map. This is just a different, little different than what the city shows, but it's the same. You see the existing zoning and the subject property in red up on the top, and then on the bottom, the proposed zoning for medical services. So the medical services zone implements the community commercial plan designation that's being proposed. And there, we went through the Metro Plan policies, and there weren't any mandatory Metro Plan policies for us to discuss. Same thing with the Gateway Refinement Plan. There's adequate public facilities. The Metro Plan diagram amendment approval criteria requires that the application meet all of the 19 statewide planning goals. And in our application, which is attachment 2 to your packet, the applicant has gone through each and every one of the criteria for approval, and in particular, address the issues regarding the consistency with the 19 statewide planning goals. Kelly Sandow performed a transportation planning rule analysis, sometimes called the TPR analysis. Her traffic study showed that using the state's rules, there would be no significant impact to the transportation system, and her report is in the packet. Here are some examples of some medical service zone, or some uses near where the medical service zone would be located. You'll see Haas Financial which would be to the north, and then to the west is Pacific Source. So that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation. Again, the discussion of the statewide planning goals and other findings of fact and conclusions of law are found in attachment 2 in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck?
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. It was very well done, very thorough, and easy to kind of break down. So I guess my question is that proposed site, it looks like on the drawing that it kind of splits the remnants of that orchard in half. And so would the proposed zoning amendment affect both the site that you're planning to use as well as the existing orchard as well? I'm just curious because it looks like there's that other piece on there that isn't spoken to.
So, Commissioner, I guess if I understand your question, maybe you could rephrase your question, because the application is for 5 acres of the southwestern portion of the site. The proposed development would encompass all 5 acres, landscaping and everything. So we'd be removing the old Filbert orchard to the south. The Filbert orchard to the north would remain, or it could be removed, but the proposal won't have any effect of what can happen to the northwest portion of the property.
That's what I was asking, if it incorporated that section to the north or not. Because as I look at this and I consider this, it seems logical to me with whatever all of the other things that are going on in that area. It seems that at some point that space with the orchard to the north is likely to get encompassed for similar uses to what you're proposing. Maybe not the exact same, but it'll likely become at some point part of that campus, and which just makes sense. And I'm just wondering, I was just wondering about that piece of it, because from the planning side of it, I'm wondering, are we just going to leave that piece for another day, or how is that going to be done? That's why I was asking the question. But
yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. Right now, Peace Health doesn't have any plans for development of that underutilized site to the north. But I think you're right to forecast that sometime in the future that may be utilized for some highest and best use, whether that be medical or something else. But at this moment, there are no plans for that northern site. And I suppose the obvious question may be, well, why not just extend the comprehensive plan amendment, map amendment to the north to encompass the rest of the site?
Right.
And the reason is more technical or legal in nature. It's because the city of Springfield has done a lot of work in the past in regards to their buildable lands inventory related to commercial industrial lands. And so you'll see that those findings in our packet, in our application that's in your packet, that talks about how we meet the need of the buildable lands inventory. And it was felt that it made sense to justify this application at this time. If need be, if Peace Health or a subsequent owner needed to use that property to develop it and campus industrial wasn't an appropriate zone, then I think you could probably justify a plan amendment zone change that would allow a designation for community commercial and some other zoning, whether that be community commercial or whether that be medical services.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much. I didn't necessarily consider it from the context of the prior work that went into the zoning beyond this, and considering that fact, I guess you're right, it does make sense. So thank you.
You have a comment? So Commissioner Buck, and I guess for the benefit of the other commissioners, another thing that is an important consideration is that the applicant had to do a TPR analysis. And so incorporating what is currently vacant property into their transportation analysis, they'd be having to look at what would be, I guess, the reasonable worst case scenario traffic generation for a part of the area that they don't have any planned projects for. So it would be a much heavier lift and a potentially higher traffic generation and potential impacts, as Kelly could probably testify to, for almost doubling the size of the area of zoning. Only roughly half of it is cited for a rehabilitation hospital, which is not a huge traffic generator, but they'd have to look at, it could be like a large medical clinic that locates on the northwest corner, and the traffic associated with that could cause there to be necessary impacts to, traffic signal changes at Beltline and Gateway or whatever it might need to occur. And so by limiting the focus and the scope of their application to only what is needed for this particular facility, it also then does not require a bunch of other analysis and detailed findings for something that's only speculative right now. So it would be better to have a project in hand or planned for that area and come back a second time. Staff typically does say, hey, if you put everything in one bag, if you're going to do it once. But in this particular case, because of the technical details and the analysis required to support a zoning amendment of this nature, it's better to keep it as focused and concise as possible, because otherwise you're going to be doing a tremendous amount of analysis for something that you don't really have any supporting project for right now. So hopefully that will help to explain one of the reasons for keeping the boundaries as concise as possible in this location.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, no problem.
I think we got a little off track, so I'd like to go back to this script here and call for public testimony. Before we do any more questions, is there any public testimony in favor? Or public testimony neither in favor nor opposed? Or public testimony opposed?
Yeah, we do have one person online, so can you read the bit about how to join, how to raise their hand if they're online? Which is, I'll just do that. So
Thank you.
if you're on the phone and you wish to speak, press *9, and that would be essentially raising your hand. And if you're in the Zoom meeting, you can also raise your hand by going down to the reactions area, and you can choose raise hand. I'm not seeing any raised hands online.
Okay, what about the person that was on the phone? Are they?
No.
Okay. Well, I guess we can move on from public testimony. And then back to questions. Are there any more?
I have a handful, Chair, of just short questions, if that's all right. First of all, I appreciate this. I'd be excited to have the project in Springfield. I'd be proud, and it's great. And I think it's very reasonable. That said, I have just a handful of questions. What is the closest transit stop exactly in terms of walked pedestrian feet? I'm just saying, like, does a pedestrian have to walk from the closest transit stop a mile, a half a mile, a quarter mile?
I could answer that.
Can you answer that, Andy?
So I did a rough dimensions from the roundabout that would be the north driveway entrance to the site. I don't know if you can, we could bring up an air photo, but there's a transit platform on International Way, just right by Maple Island Road. I estimated around 750 feet.
Okay.
So it's very proximate to the site. Okay. It's like essentially a city block or so.
And is this imagined rehab facility something that currently exists, or is this a new whole business that would need to start up within Peace Health?
Do you wanna, Greg, do you wanna? Or
Yeah,
Alicia?
I'm Alicia Beamer. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer with Riverbend and University District, and This would be a brand new rehab hospital. It's very innovative. It will be the first one in Oregon that will be at this vicinity. And really, the focus is to provide care for individuals who've had stroke, a traumatic brain injury, some other type of spinal cord injury. And we're just really excited to be able to offer that gift to the community. But it will be brand new. We are bringing the University District, the acute rehab unit that's currently at University District. And with that closing, it will go to Riverbend. And then once this facility is open, then those beds will be transitioned into this rehab hospital.
Fantastic. And so I'm given the employment base, where are you expecting most of the employees who will service this? I see there's about 70 during the day, 50 to 40 at night, and then 20 other part-time. Where do you expect most of them to actually be living or commuting from?
Most likely from this area.
From this
Lake
area, are we
County.
thinking, I mean, certainly, but are we imagining, I mean, we're transitioning these beds, you know, some from the University District to the hospital, the Riverbend campus, and it's gonna stay there. Are we imagining that employment base? I'm thinking in terms of the traffic study. You've done a very extensive traffic study. Are we going to be compounding additional traffic from Beltline? Are we gonna on Beltline? Are we going to hopefully see more of that employment base reach Springfield? I mean, where are the people going to be living? Have we asked that question?
So I mean, most of them will be residing just like they are right now for our other hospitals in Lane County and transitioning there. Of course, this will be an added 50 beds to our service. So we'll be adding nurses and therapists as well to our community.
Wonderful. And then I have a question, as we change the zoning, is there any change in tax basis for what it's going to cost the hospital as a result of adding commercial to that?
I don't know, great, if you have an answer, but I'll take a stab at it. I'm not a tax attorney, but there will be added a tax base because there will be development on the property. So you're going to take what right now is vacant property. I mean, the way that the Lane County assessor and assesses the property is based on land value and structures. So you're gonna be adding a structure.
Well, pardon me, but I think what I mean is by changing the zoning, are you assessed at a different rate at commercial, or is it going to stay at the same rate regardless of what kind of structure
I
is
don't
built
know, I
there?
don't know the answer to
Okay,
that. Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
And then is there any other change in value that you see for Peace Health as far as holding the property? If and God forbid, some reason this plan didn't come to fruition, and I sincerely hope it does. But if there were for something to block this from happening in the future, does that substantially alter the value of the property by having the zoning changed? Because now we can operate in commercial territory, not just the gateway in improved industrial area.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that I think a real estate broker or an appraiser would be able to answer. I would think that since we're seeking the change,
Right.
it's likely that the highest and best use is medical services or commercial.
Sure,
So
sure.
I would tend to think that the value of the property would go up with the plan amendments on change.
Sure.
Even if this project were not to go forward.
Certainly. You know, and again, I sincerely hope the project does come to fruition because I think it's an exciting change. I'm curious, Andy, has the city done any, asked for any broker opinion of values of what might change based on the zoning change of this property?
No, property values are not usually a consideration for land use actions. It's a consequence. And so, you know, the employment base and the fact that it is already part of the city's employment base, it has an inherent value. And the campus industrial could support a pretty intensive, high value development on its own. So the type of change you would have if this were to be developed as some type of a corporate headquarters building versus a medical services building, it may not translate into a significant change in the tax assessment against that, which of course the city is not, you know, we're a recipient of tax funds once the assessment is updated and, you know, is parsed out amongst all the communities in Lane County, so on. So it will grow the city's tax base with some type of development.
Right. And then forgive me, just one last question, Chair. Along with this change to this new use, medical services being one of them. Is there a number of other different uses that could also be added in this property along with that? So, I mean, we're talking commercial. And forgive me for being crass, but like now we have, an additional, drive-up pharmacy that's now on the site or other potential uses for the site. Is that a part of a consideration of what's happening here? How am I gonna ask that question? Are we just adding medical services or are we adding medical services plus many other uses along with this change?
That's a good question, and that's one of the things that the applicant and staff discussed at some length. There was consideration during initial discussions about not only the designation, but the final zoning.
Yeah.
Because this also would fit in community commercial zoning. But in discussions with the applicant, and I think staff foresaw concerns by the commission and the council as to opening up possibilities if the site, like you mentioned, doesn't move forward. Would mini storage then be considered or a drive-in or something like that? So the medical services district greatly limits and is very focused on the type of activities that can locate on the site. That's not to say there couldn't be pharmaceutical services there or a drive-up pharmacy, but it's more to do with the base of a medical provider than an independent commercial operator like Walgreens or something like that.
Right.
So there could be something embedded within the site, I guess a secondary tenant within the facility potentially, but it would not be conducive to having a commercial pharmacy or a Dutch Brothers or anything like that. I mean, there are associated uses in the Riverbend Hospital. I mean, Cafe Yum is there, was there, but it's not a standalone brick and mortar type of facility. So it's a pretty narrow focus.
Thank you. I really appreciate your answering the questions.
Commissioner Schroeder? Yeah, so you talked about, in your presentation, you talked about underutilization. You talking about the, orchard or the building to the east?
Well, I would maintain that the entire site is fairly underutilized,
Okay.
but the western portion of the entire property is very underutilized. I mean,
So, it looked like to me this footprint would fit in next to that other building. Is that footprint that the other building to the east, is that impervious surface all being used as parking? Or is it underutilized?
I'm not as familiar with the old Sony building.
Yeah, we definitely took a hard look at all the locations around the annex building, which is what we call it now, the old Sony building. This is by far, for a number of reasons, a much better location. I think from traffic pulling up to see the site and the visibility of it. But also there are a number of floodplains that run through that location, and so this site avoids most of those.
Okay, I guess my question is kind of, I mean, I understand the visibility aspect, and that's probably a paramount reason. It's a nice looking location and such, but it seems to me that then there's a chunk of ground that's just not gonna get utilized. And so, I mean, we're taking zoning that's got an opportunity for other things there. So, you thinking about expanding that area more perhaps to utilize some of that property?
I guess we'd have to look at the rest of the property to talk specifics. Majority of the north portion is that parking lot. And all of our indications point to, we need all those parking spots to serve the annex building. The location just to the west of the annex building is the loading dock. So that's that big concrete pavement area. The area to the south is access ways to get into the backside of the building. There's a lot of warehouse operations that go on there. And then if you go farther to the east, this photo doesn't represent it, but there's another large parking lot that is highly utilized. There is one last little chunk, which is in the northeast corner of the property, and that really holds it's more detention basin and holding ponds. So yeah, we definitely analyze all those locations, and both, you know, this site and the site to the north were highly suitable for this type of building. This location to the south was better because of the avoiding the 100-year floodplain.
Okay, all right. One last question. So you talked about a 2-year time frame. This is 2 years ago that you started this process. Did I misunderstand you, or?
I don't remember talking about a time frame, a 2-year time frame.
So in terms of design and getting with the city and starting that process, about how long ago was that?
Yeah, maybe when we first broached the subject with the city staff, it was probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years? I don't recall.
Maybe I wasn't involved with all of the discussions, but it.
Not that important. I was just curious how long this was.
Yeah, I mean, it's been some time coming for sure. Yeah, I don't remember the specifics off
Thank
the
you.
top of my head.
More questions?
I got some for Andy, if I could.
Okay.
So they had to have a traffic study and a sanitary sewer, engineering done for sanitary sewer and such.
The traffic study was done for the zoning map amendment. Staff is recommending that there be a sewer capacity analysis done before, in conjunction with their site development plan.
Okay,
So they'll have more details as to what the anticipated sewer flows will be from the facility. And that's based on, you know, the number of fixtures. If they have 50 rooms, are there gonna be 50 bathrooms associated with that? So all of that will need to be taken into consideration as to whether that may be impacting that pump station. And right now, actually, the city is updating its sanitary sewer master plan. So all of this site and the pump station, as well as kind of the capacity for this area, is being reviewed. So there's an opportunity, I think, for the applicant to look at getting this work done now, you know, looking at making a special request to get the pump station analysis done so that they can factor that into their site planning. So it's an opportune time, I guess. for
okay,
them to do
well,
that.
so a little bit unrelated to this, but generally, so the city doesn't have this information that they can avoid the cost of the traffic study and the engineering for the pump. I mean, so they're, you know, paying system development charges, which it seems to me those, you know, that those folks would know some of this information.
We don't have a current, so first of all, the traffic study is required regardless, because they're proposing something that's an intensification of use on the site. So that's in order to support the zoning map amendment, they have to provide that traffic impact assessment to show that there's not going to exceed the level of service provision for the nearby intersections. They won't have to provide mitigation, that sort of thing. So that's one of the reasons for the traffic studies. That's the applicant's responsibility in order to avoid what could be impacts down the road, to make sure, demonstrate that the transportation facilities are adequate to serve the site and the change to the zoning. For the sewer analysis, the city does not have, I guess, up-to-date information. The last time we had a sewer capacity analysis done, I believe, was about 4 years ago, when the Esther facility was being constructed. And so that's right on the other side of the street, basically just to the southeast of the site. When the assisted living facility was looking to go in, they also looked at the sewer capacity for that site, but it's somewhat dated. And so there's been additional development in the area. And so the most updated information would be something that would have to be procured right now.
Okay, so I guess you kind of see where I'm going with this. I mean, there's barriers to development when these things are not, you know, streamlined or what have you. I mean, if everybody's got to do a traffic study, I mean, if you put a facility in the next, you know, adjacent to it, they're gonna have to do a whole traffic study again.
No,
Um,
the reason that they're having to do this is because they're changing the zoning and the plan designation. So when we do our master plans, they're based on the plan designations, zoning of the use. So since they're proposing a change, that especially with the traffic, they're intensifying what we had planned for. So that's one of the criteria of approval for this plan amendment. For the zone change, is that the property is presently provided with adequate public facilities, services, and transportation networks. So since they're proposing to change that zoning, we have to make that finding to say, well, this new zoning will still be okay with our facilities. And because we're unsure about the water and the sanitary sewer, there are those two conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you.
So the other thing, and thank you, Sandy, for that. The other thing too is that a facility of this size, if the zoning were already in place, a traffic study likely would be required to support the actual site development if they're going to be triggering either more than 1,000 daily vehicle trips or 100 peak vehicle trips. So with a facility with 150 employees and that sort of thing, it may not trigger that threshold.
What would you
So-
do if you had that information? It said it was gonna increase it beyond what you think is the capacity, then you deny it?
It would likely be a requirement for mitigated measures. So there may be a requirement to change traffic signal timing or to put in,
Reduce the parking lot, whatever.
potentially, or look at some type of like, trip reduction techniques, like
Okay.
everybody gets a bus pass.
Okay.
Something like that. There's ways that they can mitigate, some of the traffic impacts. But it's a necessary step for commercial and even multi-unit residential developments in the city. We need to make sure that the straw is not gonna break the camel's back. So the next person in is not going to cause a failure of what's already a busy area. So it's regardless of the location in the city. It depends on the scope and the scale of the development. And it's one of the requirements we have for like site plan review in the city is making sure that traffic impacts are properly addressed. So it could be something as simple as just a letter confirmation from a traffic engineer saying, here's what the type of use is, here's what the size of the facility, here's what we propose for trips. And then the city has that documentation so that basically it covers the developer and the city for the potential impacts to the transportation system. Hopefully that addresses your inquiry. So
Yes.
it is an added cost. Yes, absolutely, it's an added cost. But it's one that puts the cost on the generator of the impact and not the community. Arguably, so.
Arguably.
Can I ask just a similar question? Is this zoning change, would you say it's 1 degree of intensity higher than the current use or several degrees of intensity higher than the current use? I'm just talking about the zoning, not the proposed site itself.
I would say the zoning is 1 degree of intensity higher because of the campus industrial use, like Richardson Sports, for example. It's a manufacturing facility. You could have 24/7 shifts working on producing wall caps, which is what they do. They're highly automated, so there's not, but they do have, a lot of employees that come to that facility.
Right.
So even with campus industrial use, you could have a large building, could be multi-story, and you could have a large number of employees, and it could be a 24/7 operation.
Right.
Doesn't tend to be, most of them are business hours, but I imagine the Peace Health Labs have people there 24 hours a day. Pacific Source, they may have call center being staffed, I'm not sure. Semantic, I'm sure was running full-time. So it's, it's an incremental change. It's a change of typology of facility as opposed to a dramatic.
Am I allowed to know, how much did it cost our dear applicants to do this traffic study? Because this is an advanced traffic study for one increment of change to the zone.
I have no idea.
No.
The applicant would have to share that.
I don't know. This is a joint venture with another entity, so those costs are, if I might, I might add something to your conversation.
yeah.
Sure.
So
We're not.
it's not uncommon.
Christina wants to break in here.
I just want to break in. We're getting really far afield of the criteria of approval. We're starting to evaluate the appropriateness of the code here, and the Planning Commission does play a role in deciding what the legislative policies ought to be to evaluate proposals like this, but in a quasi judicial hearing process, we're bound to apply the law that exists at the time the application was filed, and we cannot vary from or change that law. So the Planning Commission is bound to follow the code requirements that exist and the transportation planning rule that's in place when the application was filed. If the Planning Commission wants to have separately outside of this quasi judicial public hearing, a conversation about the requirements, submittal standards, and all of that for similar applications in the future, then that's something that can be scheduled through Sandy. But I just want to make sure that we're sticking, because this is a quasi judicial process, that we're sticking to criteria of approval.
Thank you.
I have nothing further.
Okay,
Chair, thank you.
do any other commissioners have any other questions? Hearing none. Where we at? I don't think that we really raised anything that you probably want to comment on, but you, okay.
Thank you.
And did we make sure to open it up for public comment to the public?
We did that earlier. Do you want us to do it again?
That was that business from the audience,
Nope.
or was that, okay. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't skip that.
Thank you.
The chair did call for testimony in favor, neutral and opposed.
Yeah, there was not any.
And the applicant is not requesting that the record remain open.
Okay. Would the commission like to close the public hearing and the public record, or continue the hearing and hold the record open to another date?
I move that we close the record.
I'll second.
Any discussion about that? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. Do we need to do like a roll call on that, or?
A
No.
roll call vote, actually under Oregon Public Records Law, a roll call vote is required when you vote on the application. I think to close the record and hearing, you're not required to even take a vote, so it's fine. I just want to make sure you do a roll call when you get to other substantive motions.
Okay. So the motion to close the hearing carried.
Record.
Close the record, okay. Where are we at now? Sandy?
Maybe the public hearing is still open.
Okay. So should we close the public hearing, or do we need to?
Yeah, I think that was implied, but go ahead and make sure that we've covered that as well.
And now, is that a separate vote, or do I just say that we did?
I think we'll just sit,
I'm sorry,
that's all right.
it's my first day.
No worries.
So why don't we have, restate the motion that you close the public hearing and the record, just to be sure, and then we can do that again.
Okay. So, the motion on the table is that we close the public hearing and the public record. And you want to just do a roll call for us?
Sure. Vice Chair Rhodes-Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Buck,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmunk,
Aye.
and Commissioner Stout.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4 in favor, no opposed, and 2 absent. Okay. So if we're ready to discuss the application, I will entertain a motion from the commission.
I move that we approve the application as presented.
Second? Second. Okay. Do you have any discussion about that motion?
I guess I'd just like to pose a question, and you had a lot of discussion. Is there anything that you would want to, is there anything not in the findings that you would want to add to the findings to support your decision? Or is it all covered in there? So that's just a question I would put out there.
I personally don't need to add anything.
Okay.
Anybody want to add anything?
No,
Okay,
So Chair, can we just clarify, the applicant has requested we clarify that the motion is to recommend approval of the applications to the city council.
okay,
correct. The motion is to recommend the application to the city council.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck.
Can we actually, it's the motion should be to adopt the orders included in the packet.
Yes,
And the-
thank you,
I
Christina.
think it's in the
I-
script.
Let
which
me
attachments those are.
restate that, Chair.
okay,
I move to adopt the order as described in our packet, as presented tonight. Did I get that right, Christina?
Yeah, I think there's two orders. They are in attachments
4 and 5.
4 and 5. I wanted to say 3 and 4, but that was wrong.
so I've got this in front of me. I would entertain a motion to move to adopt the order approving the Metro Plan Amendment and the zone change applications.
I move to adopt the Metro Plan change in the applications in sections 4 and 5.
I don't think we need to restate that anymore.
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
And was there any more discussion? Doesn't sound like it. You want to give us a roll call?
Sure. Vice Chair Rhodes Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Buck,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmunk. And Commissioner Stout.
Aye. Okay, so that motion carries 4 in favor, none opposed, and 2 absent. Okay, the next item of business from the planning, the next item is business from the planning commission. Are there any reports of council action? Okay, go ahead.
I do have a report from the October 9th session.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm gonna highlight the parts that pertain to the planning commission and zoning. On October 9th, city council did hear discussion from staff on the crosswalk and sidewalk expansion for 69th and Thurston. The council had previously canceled an order for a crosswalk, and staff came back to them and said that they recommend that they actually keep that order in place due to the traffic there and the safety considerations. And further evaluate Darlene Lane. Also in that same session later, there was significant discussion on housing in kind of several sections. One was just reviewing the mandates from the state as well as just the overall needs in the comprehensive plan for housing, for zoning, and that included the consolidated plan, the state pass key, and land zoning, as well as identifying the opportunities for zoning for residential in Springfield. And then also I felt it relevant that there was significant discussion on both temporary as well as the possibility to transition to permanent housing to deal with homeless issues. There was a variety of topics covered, from temporary housing to more permanent options. And there was no votes were made in this work session, but it was identified as an issue that council will need to take on in future sessions. So that is the report that I have from October 9th.
Yeah.
And I've got one for last night, November sixth. This was a joint city council, Springfield City Council and Lane County Commissioners meeting. It was the first reading for the same information we went through, stormwater post-construction requirements update, parking code update, and then minor code updates. Those were reviewed by both the commission or council and the commissioners. And then the second reading is going to be November 20. That's basically it.
Okay, you have any other business from the planning commission? Okay. How about business from the Development and Public Works Department?
I always like to talk about your next meetings, so we will not have another meeting in November, but we will have a meeting in December on Tuesday, December 5th. It will be fairly short, but as you know, you'll be giving your final recommendation on the capital improvement program that you discussed this evening in work session. And as you probably saw, we have a new council remodeled chambers. We didn't try to move in there tonight, but there are some security features that have been added. So we'd like to do an executive session, which is not open to the public, with the planning commission. The police chief has said that he's available to do that with us on Wednesday, January 3rd. So we usually meet the first Tuesday of the month, but with January 1st being a holiday, council meeting will be on the Tuesday, and so our meeting will be on Wednesday. So question if that will work for you folks. It really is best if you could come in person to that meeting. So if you all are agreeable, we could schedule that executive session for January 3rd.
Sure, that's great.
I'm open.
And
That'll work.
Understanding is it's never happened before, the executive session for planning commission, so it's a
Oh,
new,
wow.
new ground.
We're an executive planning commission.
So, just a,
Sandy, will you or Sarah be able to send out a calendar notice?
Yes,
That would be helpful. Thank you.
yes.
I'm happy to be there. It's just if it doesn't get on my calendar.
All right. We'll make sure we get that calendared for you all folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the December meeting, I don't know if we'll be in there or not. We don't have a public hearing in December, so we wouldn't normally be in there, but we might want to just try it out. We'll see. I'll talk with Sarah. She's out right now, but we'll determine where that December meeting is, which room we have it in. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I am going to be doing a presentation before City Council on November 27th to discuss the comprehensive planning work program. So looking ahead at what we have in store and sharing that with council. So that might be of interest. I will be sharing the community engagement sort of year in review that you had looked at last year. In your minutes was the additional piece that I'm going to add to that. So I'll be sending that to the council as a communication packet. So they'll be getting that along with their regular packet for November 20th. So that would be a week before I would give the comprehensive planning overview to council. So that's what I've got going on. Anybody else have anything you want to share?
We already mentioned Councilor Doyle's presence here, which we appreciate very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
To keep my mouth shut, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, Counselor Doyle is the liaison to the planning commission, as you may know, but for those who may not, who are joining us. So, I think that's all we have.
Okay, well, with that, I'm gonna adjourn the planning commission regular meeting.
Thank you.